Yeah.
Good evening to everyone present here. On behalf of Hindi University West Bengal, I extend a warm welcome to all our respected guests, speakers, faculty members, and students to today's webinar on comparative world literatures. This program has been organized with the objective of fostering dialogue across languages, cultures, and literary traditions, and of deepening our understanding of literature beyond national and linguistic boundaries. We are honored to have with us two distinguished speakers, Mr. Sarbajit Sarkar and Dr. Gautam Choubey, whose academic and creative contributions have significantly enriched the field of literary studies. We look forward to their insightful deliberations during the session. The webinar is being held under the gracious patronage of our Honorable Vice Chancellor, Professor Nandini Sahu ma'am, whose vision and academic leadership continue to inspire meaningful intellectual engagement at Hindi University, West Bengal. However, due to the last minute rescheduling of the program, the Honorable Vice Chancellor is unable to join us today. Owing to her pre-scheduled engagements, she will be sharing her video message with us shortly. Uh, it is my great pleasure to introduce the Honorable Vice Chancellor of Hindi University, West Bengal, Professor Nandini Sahu ma'am. Professor Sahu is a distinguished academician, an accomplished poet, and a renowned creative writer with almost 23 books to her credit and recognition as a best selling author on Amazon. She has received several prestigious honors, including double gold medals, the Literary Award, and gold medal from the Vice President of India, the Michael Madhusudan Academy of Award in the year of 2024, and Lifetime Achievement Award in the year 2024 too. Her latest publication, Medusa, we all know Medusa, along with recent recognitions such as the Tagore Samman in the year 2025 and an honorary fellowship from the International Academy of Ethics, reflects the depth and range of her literary and academic contributions. Her work in new literatures, critical theory, and folklore has firmly established her as a leading voice in Indian English literature and higher education. We look forward to her message.
Namaskar. I invite Dr. Gautam Choubey and Sarbajit Sarkar ji to be a part of Hindi University Special Lecture Series on Comparative World Literatures. I know both of them from very close quarters. I have a very long association with Dr. Gautam Choubey since my days in Delhi, my years, my decades in Delhi, in fact. And I know his work very closely. I know that he is one of the finest persons that I have come across. At the same time, his contribution to Indian academia through his research, critical research, and translation of seminal texts is something that have made him very popular, very famous all over the country. And he is a person who I can always go to in case I need any kind of help for the students vis-a-vis translation or research or publications. My long association with Dr. Gautam Choubey makes me very happy today that I could host him to be a part of our Hindi University Special Lecture Series on Comparative World Literatures. I could not attend the lectures in person because of my pre-scheduled engagements. But later on, when I listened to the recordings of both the speakers, I was very glad that they have contributed in a meaningful way to this important lecture series. I am sure that our participants, audiences, our students, research scholars and faculty members will be enriched by the lectures delivered by both the speakers today. As far as Sarbajit Sarkarji is concerned, I had known him through social media a few years ago. And when I came to West Bengal and I joined as the Vice Chancellor in Hindi University last year, he was one among those very few people who made me feel at home in West Bengal. He invited me to his publishing house and to the outlet for important books that he has in Calcutta. It's a very important and a very wonderful place. I visited, I had a long interaction with him. I got to know that he is doing varieties of things for the development of the state in general and for introduction of an intellectual and academic environment in Calcutta. I thank you very much, Sarbajit Sarkarji, for accepting our invitation and of course for delivering an important lecture in the Hindi University Special Lecture Series. We are going to be enriched by you. We are enriched by you, and once again I congratulate you and welcome you. I listened to both the lectures very carefully from the recordings, and from Dr. Gautam Choubey's lecture, I found a few important points that need to be pointed out, that need to be emphasized for future research and syllabus design in Hindi University. Dr. Gautam offered a nuanced comparative framework by reading Leo Tolstoy through Munshi Premchand. What a beautiful comparison. And he very productively discussed ethical realism, moral responsibility of the comparatists, and the social function of literature as a platform. His discussion of Tolstoy's engagement with India, especially through Mahatma Gandhi, highlighted transnational intellectual exchanges and the circulation of ideas beyond Europe. This is so important, Dr. Gautam, that you challenged a Eurocentric comparative literature. The emphasis on Nirmal Verma was particularly significant. You situated him as a key mediator of European European literary consciousness in modern Hindi prose. I know that you are an eminent Hindi writer and translator, apart from being a professor of English. So, no doubt your ideas on Nirmal Verma are so radical and so creative as well as interdisciplinary. Your lecture demonstrated how comparative literary studies can move beyond influence hunting to ethical and cultural dialogue between two cultures and two languages. Thank you once again, Dr. Gautam, for accepting our invitation and of course for contributing to the lecture series in a big way. Now coming to Sarbajit Sarkarji's lecture, it compellingly articulated the scope and relevance of comparative world literatures in a globalized and uneven cultural landscape. He discussed comparison as a critical method rather than a mere aggregation of texts, emphasizing plurality, translation, and intercultural reading practices. You are not just a writer, you are a publisher, so you understand the needs and the demands of the market. So only you could have discussed this kind of an important point with our participants. Your lecture discussed how comparative approaches challenge the Eurocentric canons, rightly so, and it opens space for marginal indigenous and non-Western literary traditions. We have been trying to break the canon since the day one at Hindi University, and you contributed to that. Your intervention reaffirmed comparative world literatures as an essential discipline for fostering intellectual openness, ethical reading, and cross cultural literacy in the contemporary humanities. Once again, I congratulate both of you for being a part of this very important lecture series which has been creating ripples in the country. In future, we would need your support and help for our syllabus design and for more number of lectures and such activities at Hindi University. Thank you and namaskar.
It is now my privilege to introduce our first speaker for today's session, Mr. Sarbajit Sarkar. Mr. Sarkar is a poet, writer, and painter, translator, essayist, editor, and of course, an scriptwriter whose work spans multiple creative and intellectual domains. A bilingual literary figure from Kolkata, he has authored 7 books of poetry and 3 collections of short stories in Bengali and English. His critical essays on literature and art have appeared in several esteemed journals and platforms, including the Critical Flame, Sangbad Pratidin, Abahman, the Indian Express, and the 4-number platform, among others. He is the chief creative director of Hawajan Publishers, which has been honored with the BRICS Award for Excellence in Publishing. He has also translated the German expressionist artist Paul Klee's diary on art and aesthetics into Bengali, reflecting his engagement with cross-cultural literary and artistic traditions. In addition, he works as an illustrator and designer for several publications, contributing significantly to the visual and creative dimensions of publishing. We are truly delighted to have such a multifaceted personality with us today. May I now invite Mr. Sarbajit Sarkar to kindly deliver his lecture. Sir, please.
Thank you so much. And thanks to Hindi University and thanks to Madam Sahu, Vice Chancellor, Honorable Vice Chancellor of Hindi University, that you have given me this platform to share my thoughts about world comparative literature. Before I start, let me start with a little anecdote about my childhood days. When I was about 8 or 9 years old, and when I started reading basically children's books and children's classics, I still remember 2 books in particular which kept haunting me throughout my growing up days too. And of course, I was a child then, so I didn't realize much about it. That was exactly the dimensions and the meaning those 2 books were carrying. But as I grew matured with my, as I matured and became a mature reader kind of thing, then I started realizing that these 2 books really actually played a basic landscape. They created a sort of landscape for my further reading and getting inside the literature as a genre, as all the genres about literature. Now, what are these 2 books? One of them was a Bengali book. It's called Khire Putul. It was written by a great painter of Bengal art. It was Avaniendranath who wrote this book. And the other was Oliver Twist by Charles Dickens. Now, why I mentioned these 2 books is because if you see, since when I started my schooling, I was studying in 2 different languages. One was Bengali, of course, that was my mother tongue, and that's what we used to speak and read and write in our family also. But my entire schooling was in an Anglo-English medium school, and the medium was English. So I was conversant and I was able to studies in both the language. So that's how these two books, Khiret Putul, which was written in Bengali, and Oliver Twist, which was originally an English novel by Charles Dickens, both of them I read. And what I found, discovered afterwards, is that both the stories, it created a space inside my brain or inside my mind, which was basically verging on empathy or the feelings towards the people who resides in the on the margin, who are downtrodden, or maybe people who were on the outskirts of the mainstream. And it was about their struggle and their hopes and their dreams. And it's been written in two different languages, worlds apart. But even then, these two things, these two books, these two literature, example of literature, even if it was coming from a different poles in this world, but they have something very similar to them. That was the emotions, that was the good feelings, that was the dreams of the human beings anywhere inside in the world is same, almost same. But how the way it differs is only in their form. Now, these similarities between different literature that has been written throughout this civilization, whatever language it was been written, always carried the human emotions and the feelings and the thoughts, and they are more or less similar to each other. But it's been written in different language. It's been written in different forms, different narrative structures and forms. Now, why this difference came? So, in a way, literature always carried not only the human feelings and their thoughts and ideas, but it also carried different aspects of each individual's culture, their religion, their politics, their geography, their history. I mean, the entire thing which this world consists of, everything comes out with one particular objective in mind, and that in Rabindranath Tagore, our great poet, who summarized it in one single short sentence that what is Sahitya? Sahitya kya hai? What is literature? Literature is something that brings people together, that that gels everything everywhere, whatever the differences are, local differences or whatever is there. But even then, literature is something that gets people united, talks about a unified, harmonious, and homogeneous achieve, desire to uplift ourselves from our daily sufferings or griefs or whatever, all the negative feelings that people also carry due to the world's, the world, how it is today. Now, it's so literature in that way, uh, most important objective of literature becomes an act of resistance. I think that's a very, very important word in today's world when it's been traumatized by violence all across the globe. It's more reason that literature plays a very, very important part. And this literature doesn't come from one nationality or one geography or one plan of people. It comes from all over the world. Now, this study of world literature and the comparative study of world literature, it teaches us not only to see in literature in isolation, it teaches us to see or receive literature as a whole with its similarities and also with their differences, and how they are born and how the culture motivates them to take shape and how they influence each other. Because literature itself is like a river, a fast flowing, slow moving, but sometimes it's full of tide, but it comes with a flow. It always flows because that's what literature is all about. And comparative world literature, this study itself, and I just was taking some notes on it. So it says that it's an academic discipline that examines literary texts across different languages, cultures, nations, and historical periods. So they're moving beyond the boundaries of any single tradition. So this is the most important thing, that it doesn't project or doesn't gives an authority to one single national tradition. There are a lot of literature which happened all through the world and which is still happening, and in future also it will take shape. And this cross moving, this cross connection, and this travel, this journey of literature through places, through human mind, through human heart is what is important. And this is the subject, comparative world literature studies, which teaches us how to see into that. So, in a way, we learn as readers, as introspective readers, and as very, very readers who really love literature, we try to understand and we learn from this how to be empathetic to humanity, to the human beings, and also to the universe itself, to all the beings, all the lives that exists in this world. So, in that sense, I also believe that literature, and of course, world literature itself, teaches us how to become anthropomorphic rather than anthropocentric. Why I'm saying this, I've got a reason to believe that, because anthropocentric is to believe that we human beings are the best kind of species, and we can rule or we can dictate terms to everything in this world and any living beings in this world. No, I don't believe in that. Anthropomorphic, this thing itself teaches us how to be oneself with all the other living beings in this world. And why living beings? Oh, sorry, even plants are living beings. So to be in relation with plants as well as animals and the humankinds and the bugs and whatever is living in this world, we get to get make a relation with them, and that's what happens in that realm of literature. So uh, I won't go. I'm trying to share my thoughts about comparative world literature. So I'm not going into the theoretical part of it, as you must be. You are all learned people, and we have got good students all here. So you all know that what's the syllabus like. So I'm not going into deep in depth of that, because I'm not that way an academic guy. I'm talking from my feelings of being a poet and trying to understand the human beings, the emotions, and how what is a reality, and how imagination functions to change that reality also. This is what my intention of today's speech is. Now, I'll I'll show you something, a diagram which I was thinking about. Now, do you know what is this? Can you see this? This is called a fibril. And you know what is a fibril? Fibril is a sort of a fiber, which a single fiber which makes a it makes a fiber. Okay, but this is the single unit of fibril, which has got three this side and the three nodal points this side, and inside and in between there's a journey of it. Now it happens that uh, muscles are formed like this, and the tentacles, this acts as a tentacle between the muscles, and the bunch of it makes a muscle strength, makes our body strength, and that's how it works. Language actually works like that. Very recently I have been studying a book which is by Edward Glissant. Edward Glissant. I can show you the book also. It was with me right now. Edward Glissant is a French Caribbean poet, philosopher, writer, essayist. He's a lot of things actually. And he It's a very interesting studies he has made. Now, what he said in brief is that um, there were a migration of people from Africa, the oldest continent. That's what they say. And those people, in millions, they had to cross over the sea, and they were brought to another continent, which was on the west. And from even there were people in the western side also. They also migrated and went eastwards. Now this exchange of people, they why did they came? Because of trade, because slavery was existent at one point of time in civilization. We all know that. Now what happened to the language and the culture and the imagination uh, and the people, I mean the thoughts and their own songs, and they didn't have a written language, of course, over there in Africa, but they had an oral tradition of telling stories. Now what happened to that? It came as, I mean, it came through them, through the people who suffered during the voyages, during the uh, this civilized these 100 centuries of slavery, and the way they were tortured and they were put in other settlements, other countries under somebody. But that's how colony grew, all the colonies, and even the colonies from other people. So people who had the power always had to colonize somebody else. That's one part of the story. That's what history is all about. World history is all about. We know about that, so there's nothing new to it to tell you. But what is important and very, very important in my understanding is that this culture, which was imbibed in those original people, from the people who were in those lands, from which they had to forcefully get exiled. They had to move from their own settlements, their homes, and their from lands. They carried something inside them. And what was that? That was their own songs and the feelings and the emotions and the voices which they had with their ambience, which their what do I say? Which their land that they owned once upon a time. They had left that. They were taken away from their own land, but they carried that inside them, and that's how it traveled miles and miles and went to another place, and it took roots over there, but they never forgot the original root which were inside them. In their forefathers, it was them. Those root was there, and that's where carried through the songs, the literature, and all the words and everything. So comparative world literature gives us this entire gamut of studies where we can see that people of different tribes, different clans, people who are coming from different lands, whether they have been brought into forcefully or they migrated on their own, is a different story, and we can get into that when we read history and sociology and all other things. But as of literature is concerned, we get to know that yes, this is how literature never stops anywhere. Literature never ceased to be anywhere. It it was with the Roman civilization, it was with the Greek civilization before that, and then came to the Iranian civilization, I mean the Persian civilization, because before Iran, Persia was there, and Persian was a great civilization. And the Persians came to India also. And that's how we were influenced by the Sanskrit, because the Indus Valley civilization was there. So we were influenced and we had our own literature also. So Sanskrit literature, let's say for Ramayana and Mahabharata, the two epics, those were important to us, and that held the entire ethos and the essence of what we think. That was after that, after the Persian invasion, their good things, their literature, their songs, their music, their drama, that also came into us, and we absorb that. We never tried to keep it away from us. It was I mean, it was sort of an amalgamation. You see what literature can do. It can take away essence of one particular geographical area with a certain history and politics and whatever it is, and the ethos of the human beings, and it can mix with the ethos that was transported from another place, another geographical area, and then it mixes up and then it enriches itself. So that's very important, because enriching oneself, enriching, enlightening oneself with new ideas, new thoughts, not going away from our own roots, not excluding our own heritage. I'm not saying that. And tradition has to be taken in. And then tradition and the heritage, when it comes into being and mixes up with another language, another form of literature or whatever, then it nourishes itself. It becomes more of a, it becomes more voluminous. It becomes more whole. It doesn't becomes isolated. So that's a most important thing I think we learned from this thing, and a couple of more things. It was this was interesting. Do I have time? Do I have time? Hello. Okay. So and one more thing is very important. I was thinking about this, that how South Asian literature, if we are talking about our own kind of literature, that is South Asian literature, whether how important it is in today's world, and in what framework world comparative literature, in the framework of world comparative literature, how can South Asian literature, which is our own literature, we can say, it actually flourishes, and how it can interact with it in the total perspective of world comparative literature. Now, when we approach South Asian literature comparatively, we immediately encounter a productive tension. Tension. Why a tension? Because on one hand, we have a region of extraordinary linguistic diversity. Now, what is that? It's basically that we are a country of diversified topography, diversified language. A lot of things are dissimilar to each other. But at the same time, we can say that it's our country, our nation, it's India, and where we are actually uh, enriched ourselves. We are full body. We are really become a whole, a sort of universe in ourselves itself, because we have those differences and also the similarities. So we can say that it's us. Now, this is important. Calling ourselves us. No individual is important, but all of us are important. And that's how, this is what we can tell others in this world, to this world, who are, okay, sometimes they become violent, they go for separatism, they go for differentiation between people. But what we have to offer as South Asian people of South Asia, and as Indians in particular, this is what we have to offer. There's a Sanskrit sloka which most of you know, Vasudhaiva Kutumbakam, which means that the entire world is our guests. Whoever you are coming from other places from the world, you are all our guests. And we are honored to have you with us. And because through our exchanges of thoughts, through the exchanges we can do through our music, through our learnings, through our literature, through our thoughts, philosophy, ideas, whatever it is, we can actually enrich ourselves. And this in return we can give to the world, to the people all across. So it's basically that what it comes to my mind. And I also, in recent years, have seen that South Asian literature demands this approach, that we resist the impulse to view literature through a single nationalist or linguistic frame. To read only in English is to miss the vitality of the contemporary Kannada or Hindi or Bengali fiction. To focus solely on post independence writing is to overlook the medieval Bhakti poets whose vernacular radicalism still echoes today. This is important. Yet to read everything is impossible, of course, but then we can at least have the crux of it, the essence of it. We can at least get get that, because the disciplines of these comparative world literature studies, it's essential. It can help us to understand the essential paradox, the paradox of the dissimilarities, the paradox of the difference, but at the same time the unification mode. Um, so that's it. Basically, I think I have gone into extent of it, and I'll be happy to hear to Dr. Gautam Choubey. Yes, because I'm very interested. Yeah, his thoughts. Thank you so much. Thank you so much, Parveen. Yeah.
Thank you so much, sir. I must say that you beautifully highlighted how imagination allows comparative world literatures to transcend boundaries, connecting diverse cultures through shared human creativity. Through your insights, literature emerged as a space where world meet, converse, and I must say, and reimagine each other beyond linguistic and cultural limits. Thank you once again. And now I must say it is my pleasure to introduce our next speaker, Dr. Gautam Choubey. Dr. Choubey is an academic novelist and translator widely recognized for his significant contributions to contemporary literature discourse. He is also the host of Sansad TV's talk show on Indian literature, Likhavat, where he engages with diverse literary voices and ideas. As a translator, Dr. Choubey has brought important works to wider audiences. His translations include the prose fiction of Suryakant Tripathi Nirala, that is, a portrait of love from Penguin. Andre Beite, that is Loktantra or Uski Sansthaएं from Oxford University Press, and he has also co-translated the Hindi bestseller 12th Fail, we all know very much. So his critically acclaimed translation of Pandey's Kapil's historical romance, Full Sunghi from Penguin, holds particular distinction as the first ever translation of a Bhojpuri novel into English, marking a significant milestone in Indian literary translation. Dr. Choubey is also a bilingual columnist with his writings featured in leading publications such as The Times of India, Deccan Herald, The Pioneer, and Rashtriya Sahara, among others. His recent Hindi novel, Chakka Jam, set against the backdrop of the JP movement and the 1974 rail strike, has received wide recognition, earning the Kalinga Book Award in the year 2025 and the Shiv Kumar Shiv Smriti Samman in the year 2025 too. The forthcoming English translation of the novel has also been shortlisted for the Pen Salt Translation Grant, reflecting its growing international appeal. At present, Dr. Choubey is editing the book of literature, Hindi literature for Penguin, and is engaged in translating Manju Kapoor's Difficult Daughters into Hindi. We are truly honored to have such a distinguished scholar and literary figure with us today. Now, may I invite Dr. Gautam Choubey to kindly deliver his lecture. Sir, please.
Thank you, Dr. Paramita. I'm very grateful to the Hindu University and to you and to Professor Nandini Sahu, Honorable Vice Chancellor of Hindu University in particular, for persuading me to come to this wonderful forum that has seen many eminent scholars speaking on different aspects of world literature in a comparative perspective. And thank you also for that very generous introduction. Well, it puts a bit of a pressure on me, Um, um, I've been given 30 minutes, and I thought that in the 30 minutes I have, um, please bear with me. There could be some background noise because there's some bhajan going on. The Navratras are here, and there is some ritual celebration happening.
We're
Uh,
happy to have that background sound.
in the blog, yes. So you'll have a background score to my lecture. I mean, how often do you see that? A lecture being put to a background score. In today's lecture, I'll speak briefly. 30 minutes is although not very brief, but I'll speak briefly on an aspect of world literature that has interested me a great deal, which is Leo Tolstoy's contribution to Indian literature and how that contribution has shaped Indian literature, and in a comparative perspective, to understand the consequences, the nuances of Leo Tolstoy's influence on Indian literature, and how that opens up the possibility of a comparative framework beyond the Eurocentric or the Anglophone world. In 1978, I think it will be a good way to start the story, when we celebrated the 150th anniversary of Leo Tolstoy's birth. India celebrated it with much pomp, and there was a holiday declared in India. How often do you see that? The birth of an author who never set foot in India being marked with such pomp and pageantry. So there was a national holiday, and many committees were constituted, and many lectures were organized, conferences were organized, journals, academic, literary journals brought out special issues dedicated to Leo Tolstoy. So it marked a significant event in our national life, and I think, and this is also almost 30 years after our independence. So what it led me was to think of Leo Tolstoy as a figure in world literature, who sort of opened up India's possibility, or it opened up Indian literature to influences from beyond the English world. Uh, when we speak of world literature, we are not only comparing texts across cultures, but we are also thinking of the roots of circulation, and also how texts travel and are translated and are reimagined in different contexts. And keeping that in mind, the example of Leo Tolstoy is very interesting to me. Uh, what I'm about to say, I look at Leo Tolstoy, I look at the way Tolstoy was imagined, and look at Tolstoy's own engagement with India, and look at how Tolstoy's stories were translated by Premchand very briefly. And in the closing segments of my lecture, I will look at the figure of Nirmal Verma, who takes this notion of world literature quite literally, beyond Tolstoy. His arrival in Hindi literature, or his oeuvre in Hindi literature, is almost uh, synonymous with Hindi literature presenting itself as a sample of world literature, as a form of world literature. Um, Firstly, when you think of Premchand and Leo Tolstoy, the connection, Premchand translated his short stories that were meant as educational tracts, didactic short stories, which Tolstoy wrote for his peasants at his farm at Yasnaya Polyana. And he translated these stories, and while translating these stories as Tolstoy ki kahaniya, he changed the context quite a great deal, and he recontextualized them, and he imbued them with a distinctive Indian sensibility, a distinctive Hindi sensibility, or a distinctive North Indian sensibility. And that is very interesting to notice, because these stories were didactic, stories that were written originally for the peasants at Yasnaya Polyana, the farm where Tolstoy conducted his experiments. Tolstoy himself claimed that these stories were originally of Indian origin. So very interesting. Tolstoy writes these stories for his peasants and calls them stories with a distinct, describes them as stories of Indian origin. And then you have Premchand translating them, or contextualizing them, or adapting them to the Indian context and Indianizing them further. So it's as if the stories go from India to Tolstoy, and from Tolstoy they come back to India. So this is the trajectory that I'm trying to understand here, or perhaps very briefly map out for you in this short lecture. Uh, Now, when Premchand is re-Indianizing these stories, the stories of in Tolstoy ki Kahaniya, many of the things undergo change. Of course, the setting becomes different. The Caucasian setting or the Tsarist setting, that changes. That the Orthodox Christian worldview, that also changes. So there are many changes that we see Premchand bringing about in his translations of Tolstoy. And this translation is crucial for comparative world literature. It shows that Hindi realist village, for which Premchand is famous, is not simply an indigenous or vernacular isolation. The village that Premchand portrays, and that becomes in a way emblematic of Indian life, because Premchand is then translated also in Russia. Premchand becomes one of the most translated of Indian writers in Russia, and therefore his representation, his idea of village becomes the representative of Indian village to the Russian people or whoever read Premchand in translation. That Hindi realist, that village in the Hindi realist story, it's itself not simply indigenous or vernacular, but is a result of a dialogic encounter with European realism mediated through translations and adaptations. So what I'm trying to say is that Tolstoy writes these stories for his peasants, for the children of his peasants, to be very particular, at Yasnaya Polyana. And he described these stories as having an Indian origin. And I'll come to that later. These stories then get translated by Premchand as Tolstoy ki Kahaniya, where he makes an attempt to Indianize these stories further by changing their context, by changing their ethical context, by changing also their religious context. And thus emerges the story, the village in Premchand's story, which in turn becomes emblematic of Hindi heartland or villages in North India. So what I'm trying to suggest is that these villages that emerge in Premchand's story, uh, have emerged on account of a kind of an interaction, a dialogic encounter, a dialogic engagement with Tolstoy's own stories. And therefore, this encounter with European realism, that is mediated through translation and adaptation, becomes significant and perhaps lends itself to the assumption that these stories perhaps fit the label of world literature and also offer a kind of a comparative framework to understand that. The translation process also, as we know, domesticates Tolstoy. So we can think of this as a two-way movement. Tolstoy enters Hindi, but Hindi peasants occupy Tolstoy's plot, changing what the Russian story can mean in a colonial context. Now, Tolstoy, like I said, Tolstoy himself was quite inspired by India and had devoted a considerable length of his career reading Indian literature, Indian philosophy, and that is the reason why when he writes those stories, those didactic moral stories, he calls them very distinctly Indian. Tolstoy took up his India studies in 1870s and in 1880s, and this was in connection with publication of a series of books on Oriental thinkers, and he began with literature on Buddhism. He was drawn to Buddhism by its idea of equality. In his essays in the popular almanac, Family Reading, Tolstoy gave an accessible interpretation of ancient Indian moral teachings. He was also in awe of Indian antiquity and Indian sages. He had followed Vedas also. We gathered that from some of his writings, and he considered Vedas as a masterpiece of world literature. And he said that the Vedas express the highest emotions. So Premchand Tolstoy, engages with Buddhism. Thereafter, we see him engaging with the Vedas. He also corresponds with a number of Indian scholars. For example, around 1901, he corresponds with Ramaseshan, who was a writer and public figure and the editor of Madras journal, The Aryan. In this letter, Ramaseshan wrote a letter to Tolstoy, to be very fair, and described in the letter, Ramakrishna described the plight of his country and asked Tolstoy for a word of encouragement to his compatriots in their struggle for national liberation. And Tolstoy replied in 1901. So that was the first direct encounter between Tolstoy and an Indian scholar or an Indian politician, in this case, a journalist, Ramaseshan. Between 1905 and 1907, Tolstoy exchanged letters with philosophical and public, and another important philosopher and public figure, Baba Premanand Bharati, who was then living in Los Angeles and was publishing the journal The Light of India. Tolstoy disagreed with some of his views. Bharati was quite buoyant and about the victory of Japan in the war, and he was hopeful of the Asian resurgence and a resurging India along those lines. But Tolstoy did not agree with that view. But Tolstoy, in his famous letter to Hindu, quotes extensively from a book that Premanand Bharati wrote on Krishna. So even though Tolstoy disagreed with some of what Premanand Bharati had to say, he quotes at length. He translates some pages from his book on Krishna and quotes some lines from that book in his famous letter to a Hindu. Tolstoy also corresponded for a number of years with a Madras-based political writer, Gopal Chetty, who was the editor of New Reform. And he had, in fact, Gopal Chetty was perhaps one of the first Indians to have brought out a book on Tolstoy. In 1909, he published a book called Count Tolstoy, His Life and Teachings. And so Tolstoy was corresponding with Indian people. He was reading Buddhist literature. He was reading the Vedas. He was particularly influenced by Ramakrishna Paramahansa and Swami Vivekananda. Their emphasis on love, their emphasis on a universal love. So he was quite inspired by that. And he was also corresponding with political figures. He was corresponding with Ramaseshan. He had correspondence with, exchanged letters with Baba Premanand Bharati, and he was also in touch with Madras-based political writer Gopal Chetty, who, like I mentioned, brought out the first biography of Premchand's life. And in 1908, he wrote the famous A Letter to a Hindu in response to Indian revolutionary Taraknath Das, arguing that Indians should resist British imperialism through love and non-violent non-cooperation rather than violence. This letter was published in the nationalist paper Free Hindustan, then reprinted in Gandhi's Indian Opinion and circulated among Indian readers, becoming an important text in debates on methods of resistance. So what is very interesting is that around this time, Gandhi engages with Premchand, and Tolstoy, and in all fairness, names his farm in South Africa, the Tolstoy farm. They exchange quite a few letters. So to Gandhi, and through Gandhi to Premchand and other people who were invested in the nationalist movement, Tolstoy emerges as a European sage who spoke to them, who agreed with their worldview, and who was also familiar with their worldview in the sense that he had read Buddhism, he was familiar with the Vedas, the teachings of Ramakrishna, the teachings of Vivekananda, and was also in correspondence, in touch with a lot of Indian political figures and writers and journalists. So he knew the political currents in India. He knew the philosophical and currents of Indian antiquity, and his methods and his philosophy was something which the Indians, agreed with, or perhaps saw as their own. And he was also dealing with the plight of Russian peasants, which resonated with the Indian populace back then. So to them, he became a kind of a guiding light. And Gandhi, we all know, Gandhi's engagement with Tolstoy, and how that engagement in turn, brought a certain limelight on Tolstoy and endeared him to Gandhi's generation and to the next generation of Indian writers. And that is why in 1978, we are as a nation celebrating 150th birth anniversary of Tolstoy. But there is an interesting quote that I want to draw your attention to. If Gandhi helped Indians, or if Gandhi drew Indians' attention to Tolstoy, Tolstoy too, became significant to later writers and later thinkers in assessing the contribution of Gandhi or the philosophy of Gandhi in the context of the nationalist movement. So going back to the arc, the cyclicity of this comparative world literature frame that I'm trying to imagine. Here is a figure, an important figure in Russian literature, who has familiarized himself with Indian knowledge or Indian body of knowledge, let's put it that way, by engaging with the Vedas, by engaging with the Buddhist philosophy, by engaging with some of the contemporary political and historical commentators in India, such as Baba Premanand Bharati and Taraknath Das, and of course Gandhi, Ramaseshan and Chetty. And he writes these stories for his peasants and their children, for the education of the children of his peasants. And these stories are then get translated are adapted into India, adapted for an Indian readership or by Premchand, and who makes an attempt to Indianize them. This is one axis. The other axis is Tolstoy emerges as an important thinker, a European thinker, to the Indian mind through Gandhi. And years later, what I'm about to share is an interesting quote where somebody says that it was Tolstoy who helped Indians understand Gandhi's contribution in Gandhi's philosophy. So there is this cyclicity, India to Tolstoy, Tolstoy back to India, Gandhi to Tolstoy, and from Tolstoy back to Gandhi. So in 1969, when we were celebrating the centenarian of Gandhiji, his birth anniversary, a prominent member of the Communist Party, S.G. Sardesai, who spoke at Gandhi Symposium, said that it was Lenin's article on Tolstoy that helped clarify Gandhi's role in the Indian national liberation movement, which is very interesting. So it was Gandhi who, like I said, drew endeared Tolstoy to Indian masses, made him India's favorite favorite European writer, or Eurasian writer. And if we are to buy this argument that Sardesai is making in 1969, it was Tolstoy who helped us Indians understand or contextualize Gandhi better. Now, to understand Tolstoy, in fact, there are not one, but in fact, three contexts. Of course, it was through Gandhi and through Premchand that we understood Tolstoy. But Tolstoy also becomes important after the October Revolution, and Tolstoy also becomes important, after once Lenin starts writing about Tolstoy and his writings and his philosophy. So Tolstoy comes to us gradually, incrementally, in various forms, and we see a lot of India reflected in Tolstoy's philosophy, Tolstoy's writing, so much so that the stories that Premchand translates as Tolstoy Ki Kahani were originally conceived by Tolstoy or imagined by Tolstoy as stories of Indian origin. But it doesn't stop there. If you go by what Prabhakar Machwe has to say, he says that Tolstoy's influence in stories, he sees Tolstoy's influence across Indian languages. He sees Tolstoy's influence in stories for children by Guruji, didactic tales by Khandekar in Marathi, in stories of Janendra Kumar, Sudarshan, and Kaushik in Hindi, Ram Narayan Pathak's stories in Gujarati, Anand Shankar Ray in Bengali. Besides, Prabhakar Machwe finds that Anna Karenina, Resurrection, and the story of Cruet's Sonata made their mark on Hindi novels of W.M. Joshi, Janendra Kumar, Sharat Chand Chattopadhyay, and Prabodh Kumar Sanyal in Bengali. Of course, Mulk Raj Anand, among others. So, what I'm trying to suggest, Paramita ji, how much time do I have?
Hello. Yes, you have. Yes.
About 5 minutes.
Yes. You can continue for 5 to 10 minutes more.
Yeah.
So no problem.
Yeah, I'll quickly summarize what I have to say. So, what I'm trying to suggest here is that we have to, when we think of world literature, when we think of a comparative perspective for world literature, we have to think of genealogies. We have to think of roots. Dr. Sarbajit, in his presentation, he spoke of Tagore and Tagore's influence. And I remember visiting Shantiniketan and how the whole Shantiniketan, the is divided, is, or let's say is taken up by different nationalities. So there's this segment that's maintained by the French. There's a segment that's maintained by the Czech, by uh, Southeast Asian countries, uh, of course, by England, by America. So you see this influence of global presence. You see the whole world in a way, coming together quite literally to give form to what we know as Shantiniketan. And if Shantiniketan is to be considered as emblematic of Tagore's literature, Tagore's literature acquires its dimension and its form from its encounter with the world, which is wonderfully manifest in how Shantiniketan is curated today for the visitors. Now, what I'm also trying to suggest is that when we think of world literature, we have to think of the lineages of world literature. We have to think of the way texts circulate. We also have to think of the ways in which authors circulate. And one author in particular that I spoke of was Leo Tolstoy. And I suggested that Leo Tolstoy circulates in India through Gandhi, circulates in India on account of India's fascination with the October Revolution. He circulates in India on account of India's fascination with Lenin and the communist movement in India, or the socialist movement in India. But at the same time, Tolstoy himself is a product of global consciousness, and he has devoured, so to speak, a great deal of Indian sensibility through his engagement with Buddhist literature, through his engagement with Vivekananda and Ramakrishna, through his engagement with the Vedas, through his engagement with figures like Gandhi, Ramaseshan, Chetri, and of course, to name just a few. So when Premchand translates Tolstoy for Indian readers, he's essentially Indianizing something which is already Indian in essence. And this gives a wonderful context, a wonderful way of understanding the cyclicity of world literature for us. And perhaps this trajectory of world literature, which is not derivative, which is not mediated only by translation, but appropriation or adaptation, reaches a kind of a fruition in the figure of Nirmal Verma. Nirmal Verma comes to mind, who spent a great deal of time in Cold War Europe and translated considerably from Czech literature. And for many years, Hindi authors and critics felt that he was a Hindi writer who wrote with a European sensibility. And that to me is the essence of world literature. So if was a Hindi writer who wrote with European sensibility, Tolstoy was a Russian writer who also wrote with some Indian sensibility. Nirmal Verma as an Indian writer, writing with Czech and European sensibility. Tolstoy as a European writer, Eurasian Indian sensibility. And that is something which we see being celebrated in India. And that is why he emerged as such an important influence on Indian nationalist movement and nationalist thinking. Yeah, so I'll stop there. Thank you.
Thank you so much, sir. Thank you for your insightful talk showing how we can understand Tolstoy through Gandhi and Premchand, of course, and your discussion on Gopal Sethi's work, Tolstoy's correspondence with Baba Premchand Bharti, and the influence of Ramakrishna Paramhansa made the session truly meaningful and engaging. Thank you once again. And as we come to the close of today's webinar on comparative world literatures, it is a moment of both reflection and gratitude. We extend our heartfelt thanks to our esteemed speakers, Mr. Sarbajit Sarkar and Dr. Gautam Choubey, sir, for their insightful and enriching presentations. Their lectures offered us valuable perspectives and deepened our understanding of literature across cultures and contexts. We express our sincere gratitude to our patron, Honorable Vice Chancellor, Ma'am Professor Nandini Sahu, for her constant encouragement and visionary leadership, which continue to inspire meaningful academic engagement at Hindi University, West Bengal. I would also like to acknowledge the dedicated efforts of the Hindi University team, whose coordination and commitment ensured the smooth conduct of this program. A special note of appreciation goes to our technical support team, Ms. Kajori Das Roy and Mr. Raj Jaiswal, for their efficient handling of the session and for ensuring a seamless experience throughout. Finally, I extend my sincere thanks to all the participants for their active presence and engagement. With this, we formally conclude today's session. Thank you all for joining us today, and we look forward to your continued association with Hindi University West Bengal. Thank you and have a pleasant evening. Namaskar.
Thank you so much.
It was a pleasure listening to you, Sarbajit ji. Thank you so much.
And thank you so much. I just wanted to make a frank admission that I would like to appreciate Dr. Choubey because he mentioned two things, two of my favorite writers, Nirmal Verma and Tolstoy, of course. And in this context, they are so important. I mean, I can't explain. Thank you so much, Dr. Choubey, that you mentioned that. Thank you so much.
Thank you, sir. Thanks to all of you. Namaskar.